And we got big news coming out of Israel here at the Ayn Rand Center UK. I'm reporting from the United States, and we've got a full house here on the Thursday Collective. Please leave a like, get your super chats in now with questions and comments and to show support. All right, you'll never believe this, but the election results are in, and Netanyahu is going to be prime minister. I've always said, give him a chance. I want to see what he can do as prime minister. Finally, he's going to get a shot. All right, so let's welcome everybody here. We got the co-host. You know him. He'll someday play Netanyahu or somebody on TV. If any casting directors are watching this in Israel, it's Mark Pellegrino.
Hey, good to be here with all you guys.
And we've got the founder, CEO, SFO, CFO, and president and hardest working employee of the Ayn Rand Center UK, Razi Ginzberg.
Hey, Rucka. Hey, everybody.
And the Objectivist Movement of Israel personified in one man. It's returning guest Boaz Arad.
Hi, nice to meet you.
And very special guest also is a guy, he's advisor to a very good politician in Israel. If that sounds like an oxymoron, wait till we learn more about this person. Here is Iyar Raichel. Is it, if I said that right?
Almost. Raichel. Nice to meet you all.
Very nice. All right. So where do we start? I guess maybe Boaz, can you sort of give us a brief rundown, or you have the right to pass it along to Iyar if you prefer.
Yeah.
Why don't you basically tell me, the outsider, a guy who doesn't pay close attention to Israeli politics, what's the latest?
Basically, we saw a shift of power for the more, let's say, progressive, so-called liberal in quotation mark, and a combination of Arab and center right parties that was the anti-Bibi or anti-Netanyahu group at the Knesset that actually fell down during this election, and the rise of the more I would say religious and right wing, even the more radical right wing on the right side of the Likud party, and the conservative group of members of the Knesset that rise to power, and we have kind of pulling from each side, and none of them are exactly promoting freedom as the main flag. But within these two groups, we have members of the Knesset who are very active in promoting freedom, individual right, and of course we are honored to have Iyar here, who is the advisor of Sharren Haskel, that managed to get the first place for a few years in a row in the Freedom Index, the Israeli Freedom Index run by the Israeli Freedom Movement, that actually consider every vote, action, submission of law proposal, and so on.
Iyar, what were the election results as insofar as your boss, and tell us more about your boss, please.
Yeah. So as far as the election results, basically the coalition of Netanyahu, the Haredim, and the religious Zionism group has won. They have 64 out of 120 mandates, which is a very nice majority in the Israeli politics. And the losers are the center, the left, the Arab parties. And as far as Sharren Haskel is basically, she started as a young politician, a former Israeli Magav officer, which is the
Border Patrol.
Border Patrol, the Israeli Border Patrol,
officer,
which is basically a police with military training that is used to work in very rough civilian areas. She's a Zionist. She fights for the country. She fights for classic liberal values, capitalism. She believes in it with all her heart. She went into politics in the Likud party. Then she left the Likud because she had some beefs with Bibi. He didn't let her pass legalization of cannabis and such as, and he kind of tried to fool her a couple of times. So she moved to the coalition in the other side. And then she joined Gideon Saar and they left the Likud. And now she's running with Saar joined Benny Gantz. So now she's running Benny Gantz, and Benny Gantz is not such a fan of freedom. He's more a fan of the state, but that's a different story. That's the political constellation we have right now. We got 12 mandates, 12 seats, and she is in the 11th place. So she's in the Knesset again. Not many classic liberal politicians survived the last elections, and not at least like real liberal politicians. And I'm glad she's one of them. And this current political situation is not easy.
When you say she's a Zionist, what exactly do you mean?
That means that she supports the rights for the Jewish people to live in Israel and to have, freedom and rights and to have their own states.
As opposed to other Israeli politicians?
Yes.
Go ahead.
First of all, there are some Arab. So basically, if you look at the Arab parties, you can divide them to three kind of parties. There are the Islamists who want to destroy Israel, and there are the communists, and there are those for trying to destroy Israel by joining to the government and slowly but steady dissolving it. So the most dangerous are, of course, the communists. But so they're, of course, not Zionist. Another non-Zionist party, or it's at least debatable, is Meretz. They started as a classic liberal party in the 90s or even earlier in the late 70s. And they had two flags. One is peace with the Palestinians, and the second one is freedom, mostly as a counterweight to the Haredim, to the very Orthodox Jews who want to do very anti-liberal things, like closing the country in Shabbat by force in Saturday. But then they took the flag of peace and waved it so hard they fell, and they didn't pass. This is the first election in like 20 or 30 years they fell down, and under the limit they had under the minimum amount of votes to get into the parliament. And they basically in the last years they even gave up the peace flag, and they went for the anti-Bibi flag, which is a new last 3 years trend that officially ended today or like yesterday with the results.
The very, very religious people, like from the TV show Shtisel, which everyone in the world enjoys and comes from Israel. Those guys did not get in, you're saying, for the first time in decades.
No, Meretz did not.
Meretz, the leftists.
Those guys, yeah.
Okay.
They got
the leftist progressive. I would say about Meretz were the party that pushed the harder push, the green agenda, pushed in order to stop exploration of gas, close down power station, subsidies, and deep programs into kindergarten, schools, and so on. The Greta faculty of Israel, the Greta Thunberg faculty, this is what they pushed in Israel, climate march and so on, and at least the main force is no more in the Knesset for the next, let's say, period of time that this Knesset will rule. In Israel, nobody knows how long it's going to take. Usually the formal length of Knesset is supposed to be 4 years between election, but if I take the history of Israel, I think the average is something like 2 years or 2.5 years, and it's getting shorter in the last years. So nobody knows exactly how long it's going to last, but it seems that there is a potential for a strong coalition nowadays.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you guys about that. And by the way, I have some things to say about Meretz. I'll leave that for later. But in terms of, so it looks like Netanyahu can form a relatively stable, by Israeli standards, right-wing government. But if you look at his history when he wins elections, his go-to is not to turn right and look who he can form a coalition with there. It's to go left. Now, this time, with the fact that this is the 5th election in 3.5 years, and it has become the Netanyahu and the anti-Netanyahu factions, basically, is he going to be able to do that
Yeah, first of
Will,
all, I think that we are misleading the audience when we're talking in terms like right wing, because
yeah,
there is nothing right in the policies of Netanyahu, not economically. Basically, his whole campaign was, I will give you a free education, free housing, free whatever you like, free money trees. And this was the campaign promise. I mean, just promising everybody everything. And within the Likud, there is a group of classical liberal caucus that trying to hold back and to, in a way, to hold back this flood of statism. And unfortunately, the situation now that in order to buy and maintain the coalition with the ultra-Orthodox, which we call the Haredim, it's mean, first of all, to buy them off with a lot of, let's say, payment for unproductive activity, to keep on subsidizing educational institution that doesn't teach how to be a creative producer in the world, and to create a huge, I would say, population unemployment bomb that may blow on us in the future, because the Haredim not only taking a lot of subsidies, but also having the largest family within the Israeli society, which is a tragic when you consider that the system is democracy. I mean, their power is going to grow stronger, but it's a power of the unproductive, and this is something that really, I think this might be more dangerous than the Iranian bomb.
Wow. It sounds like Israeli politics makes American politics seem pretty what's the word? Austere. I mean, all anyone is doing in Israel, it sounds like, is just, let's say, just giving stuff out. Oh, and unlike in America, we don't have, I don't think, a community of welfare recipients that just openly says we're not going to work and we want more stuff if you want our vote. There's a still an element of embarrassment in America when you receive welfare. Sounds like Israel, it's like the fastest growing segment of Israelis are openly not planning to work. They want free education where they're not actually going to learn anything that's going to help them make any money. I mean, it sounds like Israel's going to implode. You know, Iyar, you said the communists are the biggest threat. It sounds like the welfare state kind of is already set up.
I'd like to add on it. Basically, in Israel, it's even worse than described, because the system works like this. An Israeli Hasidic, like ultra-Orthodox Jewish lad, reaches the fine age of 18. And then the state basically tells him, listen, you have two choices. You either have to join the army for 3 years, or you can study the Bible, like the Old Testament, of course, Jewish, and receive money from the state for doing so. And you also, if you do this track, you're not allowed to go to college as well. So basically, you have two choices. You sit on your ass and get welfare, or you go to the army. That's it. And if you choose the other option, you cannot do anything. You are not allowed to, because then, like, you break the army. You have to go to the army because you break the rules of the agreement. So it's basically the worst incentive you can ever give to a human being. You give them a golden trap to stay uneducated, to stay weak, to stay dependent, and to reproduce and demand more money until there is a huge overdraft in the state and it goes bankrupt. That's what's going on right now. And when you tell Israeli people, listen, this is wrong, they say, you're right, we gotta force them to go to the army instead.
Hey, and Razi, I don't think people are ashamed anymore in America, not since COVID. COVID sort of changed everything, and I think you're seeing overtly people quitting jobs to go on the dole, and openly doing these very same things, wanting their student debt forgiven. They want that free college. I mean, it's a giveaway here too.
Yeah.
Oh, it's bad.
Here it's a bit different, because they are considered to be in a holy crusade of living according to the creed of the religion, which is a unique aberration of Israel. You don't see it in the US when people need to provide for themselves. And this is, of course, unsustainable. I mean, a majority can support a minority, but not the other way around. The minority cannot support a majority of dependents. And this will not be sustainable, and I believe it will break down. And also we have to remember that after all this gloomy vision of Israel, there is another Israel. There is the Israel of the high-tech, of the innovation, of individuals that break through, developing new technologies, creating startups. I mean, if you look just the other day, there was a rating agency that follow the high-tech industry, and they rate the universities that created the highest number of high-tech entrepreneurs. And among the first 20, you have 2 Israeli universities, and then 300 universities from the US, and only after that you can see universities from other places. And we're talking about one city in the US in the size of 9 million people, or 8 and something million people, and you see creativity that surpass almost any other nation. And this is the other side of Israel, but this side will shrug his shoulders sometime, these atlases.
Well,
and this is the problem. I mean, they will not be able to pull it forward into the future if this will be the trend.
yeah, and as you mentioned, Boaz, it really isn't like welfare recipients elsewhere where you think, poor me, I can't feed my kids, I need help. They are actually supposedly doing God's work by, having lots of babies and doing nothing but studying the Bible. So, and their power has grown. So that's one of the reasons I'm wondering, if Netanyahu will actually turn left and see if he can build a coalition with parties not from his natural and again, I agree with Boaz. We should be careful with the terms of right and left. I mean, the so-called left as opposed to the so-called right. Another reason is the really difficult for me to understand as somebody who used to live there but is really not paying that much attention, the rise of Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is as far as I can tell, still a student of the Rabbi Kahana, who was, very much a racist who wanted to really get rid of the Arabs, all of them, not terrorists or something. But can either of you, Boaz or Iyar, explain the rise, but also let me know if you think this guy is actually going to get to do some of the things that he promises his voters.
Yeah, maybe you start.
Yes, I think there is a very fundamental thing that we actually can agree on that led to the rise of Ben-Gvir. I have a lot of criticism towards him, but I think we all can agree that the most fundamental responsibility of a state is to defend its citizens' life, or defend human life. Life is the highest value, and if somebody tries to hurt you, the government needs to prevent it. That's the core justification of a government. And in this field, unfortunately, in the past few years, the Israeli government is struggling, and that's an understatement. In the southern Israel, which is mostly desert, that has Jewish cities surrounded by Bedouin, which is Arabs who lives like in villages and in undeveloped places.
It's Arabs that came from a nomad tribes and still live within tribal culture.
So they are basically an armed mafia in the south that they take protection fees, they attack, they destroy businesses, they even kill, and the government doesn't know how to handle that. The government is afraid to use the proper tool to handle that because they're afraid of how the world will reply to a Jewish state doing such things to Arabs, like persecuting them and trying to get them arrested. And they're afraid of using force against them. Israeli officers are being persecuted for using justified violence against violence. and that we have horrible cases. The government does not stand behind armed forces doing their job neutralizing threats. In cases that are completely justified. And it happens not only in the South, but the South is like a prime example. It also happens in the center, in mixed cities like Lod. And in those cities, the population is not so primitive, but there is still, the Arab population is still very violent, and they commit horrible crimes against Jewish people, and of course among themselves in their mafia wars. And the government and the police and the military police are not getting the backup from the state, are not getting the right directions. And there is many people quitting the police. Many officers leaving the police saying, "I can't do it anymore. I have no, I don't have my back. I cannot like help the people," and they're leaving. And Ben-Gvir says basically, "I'm going to change it." He says, "I'm sick of it." He says, "I'm going to make sure those terrorists are persecuted. I'm going to make sure those terrorists are stopped." And he got 14 seats out of 120, and that's a lot. That's hundreds of thousands of votes out of the 6 million people who are allowed to vote. That's huge. That's a huge achievement for him, and I can understand it. Although he's crazy and he's extremely anti-liberty and he's extremely collectivist, extremely. But in his core, this message is right about the justification. This is the coarsest justification of a state: saving human life, not letting people hurt each other with violence. This is the most basic thing that the Israeli government failed to create.
Also, we have to remember that he is integrated with another party, with Smotrich and others, and the other guys at least have some sense of right economical philosophy, even though they are religious and have their wackiness in regard to conservative protection of religious values. But still, they for example, if the party that Itamar Ben-Gvir is part of will get power of one of the economic offices, they might do more good than bad. Not Itamar Ben-Gvir himself, that I see him as clueless in regard to economics. He's just parroting the same cliches of distributing wealth. But there is some light there. Also, there is light since the Likud party grew to, I think, 32 or seats. And I think that in 34 and 35, there are two classical liberal members of the Likud that are waiting in line. And in Israel, they have a trick. After you are assigned to a ministerial office, you resign from the Knesset and you evacuate your seat. So all the list move forward. So these two liberals may get into the parliament and do some good in the future. So in this case, we will have about 3 or 4 people to count on to try either to block destructive initiative or to assist with moving forward productive ones.
Mm-hmm. So the Israeli government, they've neglected their responsibility for many decades of protecting the citizens of Israel from terror, from rockets, from all types of violence. For decades, they've compromised. They shook bloody hands in public to try and show how willing they are to compromise. And it sounds like this Ben-Gvir character, some people like him, religious elements or just very kind of racist types of people, they fill that void that was needed. They're the ones stepping up and saying, well, we're for protecting you from violence, and we'll even go further and sort of take an offensive approach to dealing with people in other.
Attractiveness. This is what attract the masses.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, so in a sense, and in a big sense, it's sort of it's the fault of the of the good guys, so to speak, right? It's like the just like in America, the government's neglected to protect your rights as an individual. Then you have, the leftists stepping in and saying, oh, we'll protect your right to abortion. And now you're married to them. Or the religious nuts are saying, no, we'll protect your economic liberty, or at least they used to say that. And now you're stuck with them. So yeah, in America, Ayn Rand, for whom this network is named, lamented that the religious elements were getting together with the more pro-market elements of American politics. And she said, this is a disaster. Sounds like Israel, again, it's just like the biggest bundling of various opinions. You got actual Islamists next to, like free market people, next to Zionists, next to anti-Zionists, next to socialists. It's like everyone, the who's who is just like a bundle together. And then when a group of parties or a group of people win an election, I don't even know what that spells out.
I'd like to add to what you said, but the question is how much time I have and how interesting I am, because it's quite long.
Go for it.
I've made a few points for this meeting, because I think in order to understand Israeli politics, you have to understand the mechanism, because the Israeli political mechanism is berserk. We have no constitution, but what we do have is completely insane. And I'd like to just break it down for you for a few minutes. So I'm going to start with the way we elect our government. Okay, so let's look at the democracies of the world. So we have basically two major systems for democracy. We have the one in the United States, which is presidential, and you have your direct voting for your representatives as well. And we have the European method, in which you vote for a party, and the party is committed to an idea, to ideology. So in America, in the United States, you vote for a persona. You vote for a person, you give him the ability to have executive orders, and he's the one who is responsible for what he's doing. You vote for a leader, and this is the same with your representative. You vote for your local leader to represent you in the Congress or wherever. It's still, of course, a democracy, and there are the houses, and there are the checks and balances and everything, but basically the system is built for people who want to vote for a leader. In Europe, it's completely different. It's about representing all of the opinions, all of the ideas. It's about the seats, those seats that you choose by a party that represents an idea. They form the coalition, and the coalition is a bunch of compromises those people with ideas make in order to rule the state. All right, so we have these two methods, a method based on parties and ideas, and a method based on a leader. Now in Israel, we have quite a broken system that it's quite like the European system. We vote for parties, we vote for ideas. We've had the Labour Party, we've had the Likud, that back in the day was a classic liberal party, sort of, and something changed. I don't know if it was always like that, but at least since I'm alive, I can see that the Israeli people are voting, and they're looking for the leader. They're voting for a leader. They're looking for the Messiah. They're looking for the one leader that will save them, and they want to take down the other leader that is, for them, will bring doom forever. So basically, we need the American system for our people. That's what fits us, in my opinion. That's what fits the Israeli people, a leadership voting. But we get a broken European system. Now, why is it broken? I'm going to tell you about this as well. So there are a few reasons it's broken. The first thing is we have a very high amount of votes you need to get in order to pass. If you get less than 4 mandates, you are out of the Knesset. All your votes are burned. And this leads to a horrible situation. I think this percentage rose in 2015, and since then, our governments keep falling, breaking, and we're replacing parliaments every Wednesday. It's insane, because it breaks the ability to negotiate and build a coalition, because you cannot trade a representative. They're all in groups that have a very hard negotiation point. That's first. Second, we have no constitution. We have no constitution. We have no solid rules of the game. Now, this is horrible. This is one of the worst things in a mechanism of a state. And let me tell you what happened because of that. The Knesset, the parliament, can change the rules, change the mechanism, the process of how to build a government after being elected and before forming the government. And few election systems ago, which was like a year or like 2 years ago, which we've made like two elections since, we couldn't build a government. The politicians could not build a government. So they've changed the constitution. So there are now 2 prime ministers, because one of them couldn't get the deal. So they made, okay, the 2 opposing sides each will have a prime minister of their own, and they can veto each other. And you cannot, prime minister cannot fire the ministers of the other prime minister. It's completely bizarre. And that means you have a prime minister have no longer any incentive to fire a minister. That means every minister can do whatever the hell he wants until the whole government falls down, because you will not fire any minister out of your own part, because you'll have no majority to have another minister instead, because the government is split into camps. And it's completely crazy. There is nothing like this in the whole world. And in the next election, it went even worse, because we got a prime minister with only 6 mandates in this system. And it broke everything we were used to, everything that was common to do. There is no rules anymore, and it just completely broken. And we're still suffering from this to this day. And I use this platform. I don't think many Israelis will watch it, but I use this platform to call the upcoming government to fix this situation and change this broken constitution to have one prime minister again, because this is really, really worse. Now, once you understand all of those things I said, you can look at the results and look at the previous election and the previous election and understand the complete spin-off, the complete, crash we're in.
By the way, the reason that the left, let's say the left bloc fell apart this election was technical. It wasn't because they lacked the number of votes. It's because few small parties didn't pass the barrier of the level of votes that they needed, of 3.25%. But if you count the number of votes that have been casted toward the two blocks, they were very similar. So in a way, only because, but in this case, because of this technical maneuvering, some of the parties like Meretz will not have a voice and will not have a seat in the next Knesset, and the Likud, the party, and Benjamin Netanyahu bloc will have a stronger coalition, and he will not need all this maneuvering of two prime ministers, changing seats, or all kind of stuff like that. It might be a little bit back to the time before all these maneuvers took place. But what I like to mention that after all this chaos, and I think that we only will leave people confused, the only thing I can give you as a good advice is to open this book, this collection of the Objectivist Newsletter, and look for an article that Ayn Rand wrote in 1964. I don't know if you can see it, but the name of the article is How to Judge a Political Candidate. And first Ayn Rand identified the fact that some people see the election and the results of the election as the end of life and give it a huge amount of emphasis, and others are oblivion to it. I mean, they don't care less for nothing, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. And we have a lot to do in between. And basically, the recipe that Ayn Rand gives us is to look for consistency and to look for conviction when we choose our politician. And at least in this respect, this is me personally, this is the way I vote in Israel. I'm voting according to personality that if we'll be elected, we'll do the best that possible within these constraints. And not to the party, and not to, it's not like a football or soccer or whatever team. Contrary to the way many people choose their party. It's become to be a tradition to vote to some party. Doesn't matter what they do, they can do one and the opposite of it. And at least this is my advice, and our intellectual and philosophical work are going on. And the result is that we have, for example, Iyar, who is a student of objectivism and actually helping to shape parliamentary work. And we have Sharren that like and appreciate Ayn Rand ideas. And we had in the last session of the Knesset, we had Abir Kara that actually moved some of the most radical reform with the backing of Naftali Bennett that was also praising Ayn Rand, and so on. We have a lot of Tom Cruises around, I would say, in this respect. People who are have some appreciation to it, but also pragmatist and playing a game that corrupting the system. So somewhere in between, our task is to enhance the principal, let's say, movement of promoting ideas of individual freedom and free market. And is it possible? Maybe Iyar can give us the look from the inside, if it's possible.
I'll answer it in a moment. I just want to say one thing. So we were talking about the percentage bar that now made a very left-wing and progressive party to completely wipe out all of the votes. But 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, or 3, when the whole this whole meltdown began, it was two liberal parties, two classic liberal parties. There was the Zehut party and the New Right party, which both of them were in favor of free markets and capitalism and so on, and they fell under the bar, the percentage bar, and that's caused us to those 3 years of political hell, of horrible instability. So one time the left get hurt, one time the right get hurt. That's first. Second of all, I don't know to say about the future. I think there are voices coming, waking up, and it's a bottom-up process of people waking up and understanding that what we learned in school about socialism and about justice is upside down, and they're getting stronger and stronger, and they're getting more people to support them. But I think in every nation, there is this not in every nation, but I see it so much throughout history. When you reach into this, it's like how do I say it? Like a place where you have two choices. Okay, you have two paths to go for. You get into this economic crisis, and you either become Thatcher's Britain, or you become Venezuela. There is this certain point when you gotta say, okay, we're gonna stop this and do that, or you say we're gonna stop this and do that. Like we either continue with the hyperinflation and with the giving money and with the populist agenda and with surrendering to political pressure, or we go to make a huge change and completely fix those horrible things with actions that will have a price, political price on it. And Israel was in this exact place in the 1980s. In 1984, we had a horrible economic crisis. We were about to become Venezuela, and we were a socialist country, and the politicians decided to make a reform to open the market. Some say it was after the Yom Kippur War, 10 years after Yom Kippur War, and we were still had the fresh memory of almost being annihilated. Some say that the Israeli Ministry of Finance people sent like messages, under the table, sent messages to the United States and said, you got to force Israel to make those reforms right now. This is your opportunity. And they did. But I don't know if 1984 will happen again, when we'll reach this point, because we will reach this point. There will be a point in the future of Israel where the Haredim will be too much, and we will not be able to finance them anymore, and we'll reach to the point of bankruptcy. We'll be almost there. I know it. Like, unless we'll make a drastic change in the near future, which I don't see happening, it's going to happen. Now, the thing is that there is this connection between the Netanyahu bloc and the Haredim bloc. They have a political connection, just like Ayn Rand described in her article, the connection between the religious group and the freedom promoters. And this is breaking the Israeli political system. Now we have governments like Yair Lapid, like Avigdor Lieberman. They are banning Netanyahu. They could have formed an amazing coalition together that will promote freedoms, but they're busy fighting each other. They're busy doing the leadership politics of the United States. in a system that is very European party-like, and it just breaks the game. They break the game one election after the other.
Yeah.
Well, do you have something to add, Boaz, before we get to
just
the chat?
to mention that after all, there is some craziness in the air because there is enough people and enough power to form a rational coalition that will lead the needed reform and do the right thing. But it's personal rivalries and personal agendas that actually trump common sense.
Mm-hmm. As dire as it is, I think history shows that religious people, they rethink their religion when the secular elements of the culture are offering something beautiful. And if there's any hope, I think it's with the secular. And that's the battle. It's intellectual, it's artistic, it's a celebration of the intellect and of reason. And that brings us to some of the super chats here. Apollo Zeus with £2. Thank you for that. Michael with $20 says, well, tell me if you guys agree. Market ideology, while a minority position in the US, is still considered a legitimate perspective. In Israel, the concept of individualism and capitalism is not even considered an acceptable proposition in civilized society. What do the Israelis think?
I have something to say about that. And I'll start historically. I think when you look at the time before Israel was founded, the Jewish people were pretty much capitalists, like the vast majority of them. They were bankers, they were doing finance, they were trading, and of course, Judaism always had these collectivist ideas in them, always has those helping the poor things in them, of course, this community sense. But Jews respected the right for property and the right for life as a culture, as a religion. And what happened is when the Israeli state was founded in 1948, the communist, almost communist party took over. It was the socialist workers' party of the Israelis. And they basically created all of those incentives for the Haredim to not work and to not study. And they created this new subculture of Israeli Haredim, which is different than the Haredim in New York and the Orthodox Jews in many other places. They are used to being fed by the government. And that's created this conflict in Israel. Now, capitalism in Israel is getting more and more popular, is getting more and more understanding. People understand we need capitalism, yet they don't understand the moral base for it. The moral base for capitalism is not popular. The moral base that Ayn Rand showed us. The moral base that you have the right to fulfill your own happiness and you don't have an obligation to fulfill other people's happiness. You don't have this duty to fulfill other people's happiness. People don't understand that. They only talk about the weak and how this is good for the weak and this is bad for the weak. They don't understand we need to set people free. Mm-hmm. And this is true about Israel, but we are understanding, the people in Israel do understand how important it is to have free market and to let people prosper. But the people in Israel are finding it hard to realize that there is an idea that says that people are entitled for their own success and their own property. Yeah. And justice is not about taking something that somebody earned. They just don't understand that. And I don't know if they will in the near future. And that's the conflict in Israel. And that's because, but you gotta cut them some slack. They've been under this socialist propaganda for like 60 years. In the past 10 years, we have Facebook. We have stronger people that are persuasive and they can bring those ideas up, and we're doing it, and it's a process. And I'm working with Sharren Haskel in the Knesset and helping her stand up and say the important thing she says and pass the legislation that she does pass. And she does an amazing thing, but it's 1 out of 120. We have some good members of the Knesset, but still the vibe is very socialist. And also our fake constitution, those bills, those laws that are the base of the country, and they are changeable, but they are the legal base, they're very socialist. And that's a problem. We have very socialist pseudo constitution, and it's hard. It's very, very hard.
Yeah, mm-hmm. I would like to add about it that there is a difference between the general culture and notion in the Israeli population. The Israeli population, for example, change the trend and the way of thinking on a core subject like the military draft. It was only 18% of the Israeli population support a voluntary army 10 years ago. Now it's more than 50% all over the board. And even higher when you're dealing with the younger, 30 years and younger. So you can see the trend is changing. The same thing in regard to opening the market. The same thing in regard to bringing in a free transportation like Uber and so on that we don't have in Israel. And so the trends of the population tend to freedom, but the security problems are trampling the other issues when it's come to the election. People are worried about security issues, and if you look on kind of Maslow pyramid, they first care about their survival and then about a better economics. And this what bring people like Itamar Ben-Gvir to power.
Mm-hmm. I can definitely say, like, in the 25 years or so that I've been following Israeli politics, you definitely see the trend, moving in the right direction to some extent. I mean, yes, we have one good member of parliament, a few who are okay, but that's more than in the past. I mean, when I started following politics, nobody would mention anything about free markets, and the fact that it's now a part of the conversation, I think, is to the credit of our guests here as well. And let's hope that that trend continues.
Michael in the super chat goes on. He says, altruism and sacrifice are so ingrained in what it means to be Israeli. They wear it as a badge of honor. So is it possible for Israelis to put their own individual pursuit of happiness above, the tribe, above, 2,000 years of history and all of that? Do you see that as possible? Or are you hoping that capitalism is somehow embraced by a bunch of, semi-religious, semi-collectivist, very, very confused people, the way I see it? Don't all answer at once. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Look, first I'll say, I think it's unlikely, unfortunately, not in the near future, but there are ways to bring this moral debate up. There is, for example, one of the most important Jewish religious figures from a very far past is the Rambam, and he went after Aristotle, and he showed how Judaism connects with Aristotle values, and how is the how do we value good and bad, and there are ways to connect Judaism with values that are not altruist. But it's difficult because altruism exists in Judaism. Collectivism exists in Judaism. That's a part of Judaism. You cannot run away from it. Whatever you do, it's not gonna work. It's about getting the secular people. It's about getting the light Jews. You cannot convince an Orthodox Jewish people in that. You cannot convince hardcore religious people that altruism is not the answer. It's impossible, I think, unless there will be a major change. But it will be very hard to get there. I do it all the time. When I talk to my friends and family, I tell them altruism is immoral. Altruism is a way of oppression. Altruism is fraud. That's what I say, and I explain why. And I tell them, do what makes you feel good. Don't make other people do what makes you feel good. I do it, but that's just a drop in the ocean here. It's hard. It's very hard in Israel. The super chat they have a point, but we're doing it, and we keep doing it, and I'll keep doing it, and Boaz will keep doing it, and we're growing.
And I'm more optimistic than Iyar in this respect. I think that there is, as I mentioned before, there is two types of Israel. There is the secular, the innovative, the educated, the one that break through and actually making money. It's something that everybody want to do, and they want to create the next startup and the next unicorn and to IPO and after that go and build the next project. And you have You have a culture of serial entrepreneurs that are breeding more entrepreneurs and even larger companies and so on. This is, by the way, what we celebrated the Atlas Award project that we run every year. This is the culture that actually moved the Israeli economics, because the high-tech count for 50% of the money that coming into investment into Israel, which is a huge amount that coming from 10% of the population. So, and still 10% of the population within the high-tech industry, it's still a lot comparing to other nations. And beside that, we have the ultra-Orthodox and so on. But then, even if you dive into the labyrinth of religion, I would say that if you take religion seriously, you will be in much worse shape if you will take Christianity seriously. Like giving the other cheek and love thy enemy and so on. I mean, Jews at least don't suffer for so much altruism like Christian. I mean, Jews honor the father of the Jewish archetypes, the people who are actually running around in the Bible are people who made well for themselves. Being righteous means to make a lot of money and to prosper. So we are not in such a bad situation in this respect, but of course there is the twisted philosophy that developed by dependency and by welfare culture. But as I mentioned, we cannot sustain it for long, and it will fall down and break, and hopefully we can gather the pieces and move more part of the Israeli population toward productive and more deserving life.
It seems to me like secular Jews have often embraced altruism and turned the other cheek, and Israeli politics might reflect that at times or often, but that's the battle. The battle is for intellectual people to take Ayn Rand seriously. You mentioned the Rambam. That's Maimonides. You know, during his life, the Jews burned his books. They didn't like him. They thought he was doing horrible things. But today, the Jews, they love and celebrate Maimonides. I think they skip past the page where he says Aristotle was the wisest man to ever live. But other than that, they love him. Ayn Rand could be like the Maimonides of this century. If the Jews are reading her and everybody's reading her, I'm happy. Back to the super chats. Marilyn with $3.99. Thank you. Justin with $2 says, any thoughts on Kyrie Irving? So that's a basketball player. He promoted some kind of conspiracy nut video talking about the bankers and the Jews and I mean, there's bigger battles than this, right? Like some mildly educated basketball player tweets something. I think I would say like Israelis have more pressing concerns at this time.
I don't know how many Jews are in the Biden administration.
You tell me. A lot?
No, because they are the joke is that the government is the conspiracy.
Right. But you're saying there's a lot of Jews in government?
No, I'm joking.
No,
if there are a lot of Jews there, so he's right.
Right.
Joke,
yeah.
never.
Well, no, but people like
I got
Irving,
you. I followed you.
Yeah, no, I understand. But like people like Irving, they do say, oh, there's a lot of overrepresentation of Jews in Congress and in the banking sector and in this and there.
There is an overrepresentation of Asians as well, because if your culture promotes hard working and studying, of course, you prepare more. Mm-hmm. I think that's about it.
Yes. So keep the Jews and get the Asians out. That's a joke. Everybody rise by merit.
Just if you have sons and daughters, promote studying and working hard and achieving goals and setting goals, and it will be good. And if a culture does that, that's good as well.
Has Kanye West made a lot of noise with his recent antics in Israel? What do people think? Anybody sticking up for him, or does everyone hate him, or how would you assess the situation in Israel?
In Israel, it's a nice joke. Like we read it and we laugh. It's like, what the hell? He's going crazy.
Yeah, I mean, people like Kanye sounds like participate in the Knesset. Right.
Who cares, basically? What do you have to say?
No, but what we used to hearing this throughout history, and we're not excited anymore. Because it's like, I think it's like passé. It's irrelevant. Like it's obscure.
Mm-hmm. Regina with €2, thank you for that. And Ashley with $1.99 says, and I thought U.S. politics was broken. Great show. Yeah, I'm glad to be living in a very normal and stable place like America, listening to some of this. And yeah, you know, the more people vilify bankers and businessmen like Kanye West is basically doing, he's saying, oh, look at all these businessmen, the Jews. It's like, if you reject capitalism, then the Jews look like the bad guys because the Jews are successful. But if you understand capitalism is the way, it's the system for humans, then the Jews don't seem so bad anymore. And that's what history shows. The more people reject capitalism, the more the Jews are persecuted. That is my opinion and my assessment. Maybe you agree. What a conversation this was. And I got Razi, you didn't say much, but thank you for representing the Islamist party with that beard.
Yeah.
I did have something to add, actually. So Iyar and Boaz both mentioned Meretz, and I want to say a few words about Meretz. Now, generally in life, I don't recommend this as like, this is not an ingredient of a recipe to a happy life, to focus on the negative. But when dealing with politics, it's mostly negative, and there is a lot of evil in politics everywhere, I think, and it's difficult to find a more evil party in Israeli politics than Meretz. So Meretz is, I'm not going to get into the history of its founding. It was founded as sort of by 2.5 parties joining together in the early 90s. They first were elected to the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, in 1992. So they've been around for 30 years. And in 92, they had their best election. They won 12 of the 120 seats, which is a lot more than it sounds like in Israeli politics. It gives you a lot of power in coalition negotiations. They were part of Rabin's second government, and that was the government that very much with the encouragement of Meretz signed the disastrous Oslo Accords in 1993. I mean, within months, you started seeing suicide bombings as a regular thing in Israel. It had happened before, but it then became a regular thing. Got to the early 2000s. It was, at some point, it was a daily thing. I remember living there and basically turning on the TV in the morning, and at some point in, I think it was March 2002, the question I was asking myself before turning on the TV was not, if there was a terrorist attack, but where and how many people were killed. And we, I think, have Meretz to thank for that in a way. There's like, when I was growing up, I spent a few years in the US, some time in the UK, and I noticed that the internet wasn't as big a thing back then. Music and TV and movies would always take a while to get to Israel after they became popular in the West. And Meretz, imports pretty slowly, but eventually imports all the bad ideas of the left around the world. So Boaz, I think you mentioned they're now they're the Greens in Israel. It took them a while to see that caught on in the West, but they imported that. They imported some of the multi-gender nonsense, a lot, just basically any bad idea that the left has elsewhere. They blend it into their pro-Palestinian, anti-Israeli stand of always siding with the Palestinians on everything. And basically they're bad all around. So despite I don't like this part of the system where you actually need to get 4 seats to get into parliament. A positive that we got out of this is the demise of Meretz. Hopefully they will stay dead in future elections, but they are now no longer in the Knesset, and that is one very positive thing that came out of this election.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Of course, in the principle level, as I said, I have a lot of criticism against this percentage bar. I think it's horrible, but I'm very glad that they didn't pass. I'm very glad all of their votes are irrelevant. I'm really happy about that because their ideology is just pure evil, as Razi justifully described.
Yeah, Mark, you're still thinking of leaving California. Can I suggest Israel? Seems like a great place. They got palm trees and beaches like you're used to. What do you say? Maybe you could
Look, the politics just differ in particulars. It's pretty much the same out here in California and the United States. These idea pathogens are everywhere, and they dominate the political spectrum everywhere. So I was just amazed at how similar the problems are and the arguments are over there, even though the particulars of the way the government, is elected is different.
And maybe Palestinian politics could be a place for you, Mark. You could run for, head of the West Bank. They're due for an election. It's been, 20, 30 years. Then you're basically in. You're in.
Their method is to do one election in a lifetime till they kill the leader, and then the next, maybe.
I don't think they would like me over there.
No, it's like, it's your taxpayers that paying for the living. So, and ours, of course.
Yes, that's true.
Foreign aid.
Yep. That's a whole nother separate episode, which we should do. This has been great. Great to meet you. Great to see you. Great to see you and to see you. You'll never know who I'm pointing at. What a wonderful, thank you everybody for your support. Please leave a like and leave a super thanks so we can help, so you can help us bring you more great content like this. Good luck, guys. Coming up today at 10 p.m. UK time, it's Life on Earth with Robert Nasser on gratitude and abundance. Happy Thanksgiving. Ooh, is it already time for Thanksgiving? I'm guessing the Israelis don't do Turkey Day, but at least you got 8,000 other holidays. All right. Thank you to the Israelis. Thank you to the American and whatever Razi identifies as. Thank you. Thank you all. Leave a like, hit the join button. We'll see you back here tomorrow for the Daily Objective, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.